Hello and welcome. As an economist, one of my favorite things to do is take really complex ideas and make them simple. And there's one question that's at the heart of so much of our society. How should we slice up the economic pie? Today, we're going to dive right into that debate, looking at income inequality and poverty through the lens of economics. So this is it. This is the big question that frames everything we're about to talk about. In a country with so much wealth, how do we decide who gets what? Is the current system fair? And maybe more importantly, if it's not, what should we be doing about it? Let's unpack it. Okay, first things first. Before we can even start talking about philosophy or policy, the really heavy stuff, we need to get grounded in reality. So let's start with the hard data and see what the numbers actually tell us about the economic landscape. The official starting point for this conversation is always the poverty rate, and in 2020, that number was 11.4%. To put that in perspective, that's more than 1 out of every 10 people in the U.S. living below the official poverty line.
So what does a percentage like that actually look like in human terms? It looks like this: 37.2 million people. That's not just a statistic. That's the sheer scale of the challenge we're really talking about today. Now, this table gives us a really powerful snapshot. Economists love to break the population into 5 equal groups, which we call quintiles. And when you do, the range is just staggering. A family in the bottom group makes less than about $38,000 a year. The top group, they're making over $164,000. But then, look at the very, very top, the top 5%. Their income starts at over $300,000. The gap between the bottom and the top is just immense.
We keep using this term, poverty line. So where does it even come from? Well, it's an official government threshold, and the formula is actually surprisingly simple. It was originally based on the cost of a bare-bones, adequate food budget multiplied by 3. And that number gets adjusted every year for inflation and for how many people are in a family. Now, a national average is one thing, but the story gets much more detailed when you break it down. Poverty does not affect all groups equally, and this chart makes that crystal clear. The disparities are just stark. You can see the poverty rate for Black Americans is more than double that of non-Hispanic white Americans. And just look at the rate for households headed by a single mom. It's dramatically higher than the others. These aren't small differences. But hold on. As clear as these numbers seem, they might not be telling the whole story. Because, and this might surprise you, measuring poverty and inequality is incredibly complex, which brings us to what we can call the measurement puzzle. So what's missing? Well, a few big things. First, this data is usually pre-tax, and it often doesn't count government help like food stamps. It also misses the economic life cycle. Think about it. A medical student might have 0 income, but we wouldn't really say they're poor, right? The data also struggles to tell the difference between someone having one really bad year versus a lifetime of low income. And maybe the biggest issue? These numbers are just a snapshot. They don't show people moving up or down the economic ladder over time. Okay, so we've established the data is real, even if it's a bit fuzzy around the edges. So that leads us to the real question, the big one. What should we do about it? And this is where economics bumps right up against philosophy. Let's explore 3 major ways of thinking about what's fair. First up, utilitarianism. The core idea here is pretty simple. We should aim to create the greatest good for the greatest number of people. It's all about maximizing society's total happiness, or what economists call utility. The key concept is something called diminishing marginal utility. It sounds fancy, but it just means that an extra dollar brings a lot more happiness to a poor person than it does to a billionaire. So a utilitarian would argue that moving some money from the very rich to the very poor actually increases the total happiness in the world. Next, we have a very different idea from the philosopher John Rawls. His focus isn't on the total amount of happiness, but on the person who is the most vulnerable. He argued that a truly just society is one that does everything it can to maximize the well-being of the person who is worst off. You can think of it as the ultimate social insurance policy. And the way Rawls gets to this conclusion is with this brilliant thought experiment called the veil of ignorance. Imagine this. You get to design the perfect society from scratch. The rules, the taxes, the safety nets, everything. The only catch? You have no idea who you'll be in that society. You could be born brilliant or with a disability, into a rich family or a poor one. So, what kind of society would you build? Rawls argues you'd make absolutely sure to protect the person at the very bottom, just in case that person turned out to be you. In our third vision, libertarianism flips the whole script. Libertarians argue that we shouldn't be focused on the outcome at all, that is, who has how much money.
Instead, we should only care about the process. As long as the rules of the game are fair and everyone has an equal opportunity to compete, then whatever the final result is, it's just. In this view, the government's job is to be the referee and enforce the rules, not to change the final score.
Okay, so we've got these big competing ideas about fairness. Now let's bring it back down to earth. When a government does decide it needs to step in and reduce poverty, what tools does it actually have in its toolkit?
A classic one is the minimum wage. The argument for it is pretty straightforward. It boosts the income of low-wage workers, and it doesn't cost the government a penny. But the argument against it is that if you force employers to pay more, they might hire fewer people, leading to unemployment. Critics also point out that many minimum wage earners aren't actually from poor families. Think suburban teenagers with summer jobs.
Next up in the toolkit, we have welfare. This is a broad term for government programs that directly give income support to those in need. You've probably heard of some of them, like TANF, which is Temporary Assistance for Needy Families, or SSI, which helps people with disabilities.
And of course, welfare is always at the center of a huge debate. Critics worry that it creates what they call perverse incentives, that it might discourage people from working or even encourage families to break up. But proponents push back, arguing that life on welfare is incredibly difficult, not some comfortable lifestyle, and that in reality, the value of those benefits has actually shrunk over time.
Now for a different kind of approach, the negative income tax. The name sounds a little strange, but the idea is actually really elegant. Right now, high-income people pay taxes to the government. With a negative income tax, low-income people would get a payment from the government. It's like the tax system running in reverse to help them out. The closest thing we have in the U.S. is the Earned Income Tax Credit.
Let's look at a simple example to see how this could work. Under this system, if you earn $80,000, you end up paying zero in tax. But look what happens if your income is lower. At $40,000, the system works in reverse, and the government actually pays you $10,000. And if you have no income at all, you get a $20,000 payment. It's a system designed to make sure nobody falls below a certain income floor.
Another huge part of the government's toolkit is what we call in-kind transfers. That's just a fancy way of saying the government provides goods or services directly instead of cash. Think about food assistance through the SNAP program or healthcare through Medicaid. This brings up a classic debate. Is it better to give people what we think they need or to give them cash and trust them to make their own choices?
In all of these tools, every single one we've talked about runs into one of the most difficult challenges in all of economics. We can call it the poverty paradox. It's this fundamental, unavoidable trade-off between our desire to help the poor and the need to maintain incentives for people to work and become self-sufficient.
Here's the heart of the problem. As a person receiving benefits starts to earn more money, those benefits are gradually taken away. So imagine you decide to work an extra shift and you earn another $1, but because of that $1, your benefits get cut by, say, 70 cents. That means you only actually get to keep 30 cents from that extra $1 you worked so hard for. That's an effective tax rate of 70%. This can create a massive disincentive to work, and it can trap people in poverty.
And this leaves us with the central, burning question for policymakers and really for all of us. How do we design a system that provides a strong safety net for the most vulnerable without accidentally discouraging the very work that offers the best path to a better life? There are no easy answers here. But understanding this fundamental trade-off, well, that's the essential first step.